Hey everyone, Inquisitor Vaughn here. I hope that you guys enjoyed my introduction to my successor chapter or my homebrew chapter, the Void Lions Chapter Tribe. They are a passion project of mine. I've been working on them for about 2 years now, a year and a half, almost two. Um, and I've just enjoyed the process. And because I'm so enthusiastic about my own homebrew, I've put so much work into it and so much narrative and so much research. A lot of people have come to me and they've asked for tips about how to go about creating their own homebrew chapter. And and some people have even asked me to read over what they have and to give my opinion, and that is extremely humbling for me to to be someone that other people go to ask their opinion, or just ask for tips, just because they see how much work I've put into my own chapter. So today I've decided to make a stream of thought, stream of consciousness kind of video about some advice I would give to people about creating a homebrew chapter. And I have a few points that I want to go over. And without further ado, let's just get into it. Now, one of the things that I want to say outright is that this is primarily for people who are creating a homebrew chapter and they want to play them on the tabletop, because that's how I look at it. But if you want to just create a chapter just to write, that's another topic. And I'm sure that you can also take some advice from what I'm saying in this video and apply it to that. But this is for people who are making their own chapter and playing them on the tabletop, whether it be in large scale battles or just kill team, just any kind of setting. The first point, the first piece of advice that I would give to anyone who wants to create a homebrew chapter is to do it for yourself and not for the approval of other people. When you decide to create a homebrew chapter, you need to know why you're doing it. And if it's for the reactions of other people, that's not a strong foundation, and you're likely to drop the project as soon as people say something negative about your chapter. All right, so what I like to do with anything in life really is I like to think about the worst possible scenario, right? So if you are thinking about creating a homebrew chapter, meditate on these three points. 1, people will not like your idea. 2, people won't care about the chapter storyline. And 3, people don't want to play your chapter, or won't want to play your chapter on the tabletop. If you hear these things and you think about them and you sit with it and you just lose the motivation to make a homebrew, then you're probably doing it for the reaction of other people, because these are things that depend on other people, their reaction to it. So what if no one likes your chapter? So what if they don't want to play your chapter? That should not be the reason why you are not playing your chapter that you created, or you are not creating the chapter that you want to create. All right, so my first bit of advice is know why you are doing it, and make sure you're doing it for you. Make sure it's a project for you to feel good about yourself and make the hobby your own. Because, in the end, when things get hard, because when you create a homebrew chapter, it will get hard. These will be the reasons you fall back on. And you need to fall back on yourself, not on someone else's response. Oh, they really like that chapter, so I should continue. No. You do it for you. You do it because you want to, and you do it because it's your creative process. All right, that's my first bit of advice. Second bit of advice: if you're creating a homebrew, I need you to understand the difference in perspective in the community. And I've recently learned this myself, because I've even have friends who are close to me who don't really support my chapter. Like they think it's cool and whatever, but they're not really into the writing part of how much work I've put into it. And the reason why some people just don't like homebrews is because some people view the Warhammer 40K setting as a setting more than a storyline. So for them, it's a setting where you get to play this game in this far future setting, and it's already established who's who and what's what, and you just play in that setting. However, some people view it more as a storyline, where it's like it's a story that's been happening, and it's evolving, it's continuing, and it will continue to evolve. Now, what I found about this is that people who view the 40K universe and the 30K universe especially, but 40K universe as a setting, are a lot more technical about the game. Um, they don't really care about any new additions. They like what's established. And so this is one of the reasons why you might encounter some people who just don't like your homebrew. They're more technical about the game. It's a setting, it's not a storyline. People shouldn't be able to contribute to it. That's how they view it. But if you are a person who is interested in creating a homebrew, you are probably a kind of person who looks at it as a storyline, because I know I am. And really, if we really look at it, GW is also going in the direction of 40K being a storyline. It's no longer stagnant. There are new developments. There's Primaris. There's, the story continues. And in this story, you are able to create your own kind of situation, your own kind of chapter, your own kind of storyline. You can make your own story in the storyline of 40K. And that's something I love personally, because I am a storyteller. I like to make stories. I like to write stories. I like to build worlds and universes. And so there's a space for that in 40K. And that's pretty interesting, and that's pretty awesome. However, one of the things that the people in the setting really are serious about, like people who view Warhammer 40K as more of a setting, they're really serious about, is the fact that when people create homebrews, they kind of go out of control. They go as far as to disrespect what's already established, and that leads to my next point. If you are going to embark on the journey of creating a homebrew chapter, and you are someone who loves the narrative of 40K, if you really love the narrative of 40K, you have to respect the narrative of 40K when you are creating a homebrew chapter. And I say this because even though I'm very enthusiastic about homebrews and custom successor chapters, I'm very enthusiastic about it. I love the creativity behind it. It can get disrespectful to the already established narrative of the game. I guess in that way, I observe the setting, and I also view it as a storyline, because sometimes I hear about and I read about successor chapters that are just kind of like, this is not even 40K, like the theme is not even, it doesn't even fit. So if you're going to make a successor chapter or a homebrew chapter, respect the established lore so that your chapter is taken seriously by enthusiasts of the hobby. Because in that, like, it's not about other people and it's not about their reaction. However, you do want your chapter, you do want your creation to be taken seriously. So some of the ways that you can learn how to respect the narrative that's already set is to do your research. If you are serious about making a homebrew chapter and carving a storyline out in the 40K narrative for yourself and making the hobby your own in that way, you have to do some research. Not even some, you have to do a lot of research. You have to know what's possible and know what's not. And also just what doesn't make sense or what wouldn't make sense, and how you can make it make sense. So, for example, like, if it's established in lore that someone is dead, and the current Games Workshop narrative says that this person is dead, don't bring them back. For example, imagine a homebrew successor chapter saying that Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands, is leading their successor chapter. That does not make any sense at all, and is completely disrespectful to the narrative, because everyone knows that Ferrus Manus was the first Primarch to be killed in the Horus Heresy. So that would actually just make people angry. That would make me question what was the point when why would you say that when everyone knows he's dead? You might as well create a whole alternative universe to 40K rather than say that in your chapter he's alive and he's leading. So you got to know your limitations. If you really respect something, if you really appreciate something, you got to know what's not possible and when to stop. Know what's possible and know what's not, because some of the successor chapters I've heard of and read, it's just like, that's not cool. That's not okay. And going on the whole creating your own alternative 40K universe, that's totally possible. I've heard of people, I know a group of people who have recreated the 30K universe and the 30K Horus Heresy. Like, it completely changed it. They made their own Primarchs, their own legions. It's an amazing project, but they're not saying that it's in 30K, you know? Um, for example, if you want to create a chapter or a legion, even, because remember, there are two missing legions from the first founding legions. There are two missing. If you wanted to do that, you still have to do some research. You can't just say, "Oh, well, this is the Primarch, and oh my gosh, and they are here." And no, because if you do the research, you discover that they either were banished by the Emperor, or you kind of have to do your own research to make sure you're not being disrespectful to what's already there. Um, I know someone who created a second legion, um, and they're really awesome. They're called the Celestial Bears, and the guy who created them, DeAndre, he did his research, and it's awesome. And I love the intricate storyline that he created for them. But he was respectful. He saw that space where it was possible to create his own chapter, his own legion, and he ran with it. But he ran with it in a way that is so like artistic and respectful to the narrative that it's just like I'm a huge fan of his work, so that's advice that I would give you. Be respectful of the narrative and find where you can put your guys in, and find where these ideas you have can be put in as well. If you're creating a homebrew chapter, you're going to want some themes that flavor the chapter and kind of influence people to understand your chapter more. The problem with themes is that they can get really hard to do right, because most of the things that we would use as themes are things we are inspired by. And if we are trying to create a culture of Space Marines, or a culture from which our Space Marines comes from, we're often going to look at our history, our past here on Earth. But we got to remember, when we're creating homebrews, that this is the 41st millennium. This is far into the future. Humanity is spread out into the galaxy. And so themes should be very suggestive without being obvious that this is clearly a Japanese oriented culture. This is clearly a African culture. Try to use as much as you can to influence the reader of your work or of your homebrew to think about these things without saying it out loud, and without taking certain words or certain names or the language itself, without taking it from those original cultures, because it just loses legitimacy. Your project, it's like, all right, clearly these are samurai, and they even say they use a special weapon called the katana. Like, come on, like it just loses all legitimacy. If you are really that serious about creating a homebrew, and you want to create a culture, and you want to influence people to think about a certain culture when they're reading your work, you are going to have to create a whole new culture of people. You might even need to create your own language, which is something that I had to do. My void lines are based off of African culture, yes, but I couldn't say that. And so most of my writing is just surrounding, just influencing the reader to think, oh, African, by putting certain elements of the culture in there without taking things from the culture directly. Last but not least, if you create a homebrew chapter, you're going to have to accept one thing, and that is, if you don't take the route where it's just Primaris Marines who are Gray Shields before, and then they were sent here and they don the colors and their history is just beginning, if you don't choose that route and you choose to go even further back to a certain founding or, etc., the story will never end. You will always find something else to write on. It'll just take a life of its own, and it will be a wild ride. There will be plot holes in your own narrative that you will find later on in time, like as you're writing your fluff, that you're just like, oh wait, I have to explain that, and the story writing will just continue on and on. And so if you're ready for that, you're ready for this process. But those are my tips. Those are my bits of advice for anyone who's interested in making a chapter. With that, Inquisitor Vaughn out. Remember, the Emperor protects, and the future is successor.